Welcome back. $1,400. That's the average amount of money a middle-class family of four is getting in the celebrated tax reform plan just passed by Congress. But what a lot of working families realize is $1,400 doesn't go very far when the cost of living and housing on the Suncoast is so high. In a report titled Some Things Gotta Give, the Center for Housing Policy writes, quote, with the rising costs for housing and other necessities, many working families will be stuck in a situation where they will be unable to get ahead. And joining us for more is John Thaxton of the Gulf Coast Community Foundation, Dan Lobeck, who has battled overdevelopment in Sarasota County for years, and Michael Snipes, an economics instructor at USF Sarasota Manatee. And Michael, let me start with you because you look at this every single day at your job. As we said at the outset, $1,400 is money in your pocket, in your paycheck, but in the grand scheme of things, unless we really do see wages rise, these families who we're talking about that are struggling to make ends meet on the Suncoast and afford to be able to find a place to live and commute to work, they're going to be struggling.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that $1,400, that might be just a one-shot deal, and that's great when you get it that one time, but that's not really what's going to sustain people over extended periods of time. It does have to be those wage increases, and that's really what sustains people over time, as opposed to just kind of a one-time push.
So, John, you have been, you worked on issues like this when you were a county commissioner. You work on these issues today. What are you seeing in terms of the progress that we're making here, if there is any on the Suncoast, in terms of the affordability of housing and getting people to and from work who can't afford to live near downtown Sarasota?
Well, in terms of wages, we have seen a very long period of stagnant and effective wage decreases because of inflation impacts. So we have about 18,000 households in Sarasota County that today are within $400 to $700 of losing the housing that they're in. And that's a very catastrophic event for a household because it requires a great deal of effort and energy to recover. So with the wages being stagnant, the cost of housing increasing, it's putting more and more households on that verge of a failure. And it's very concerning because the remedy that will be assumed by government financial coffers.
Dan, do you think that a lot of people here on the Suncoast who have retired here, they've been very successful in their lives, they want to pay lower and lower taxes, which is absolutely, we all want to pay lower taxes. They have a hard time appreciating the fact there are a lot of our fellow citizens out there who are by no way means are okay in terms of, as John was describing, the situation of just being a couple of $100 away from losing their housing.
I'd like to think that most of our retirees, other people that live here, do recognize that we're looking at pretty much a tale of two cities. That there are those that are better off and there are a lot who are not.
You know, I want to stop you there because I once used that word or the phrase, the tale of two cities, and I got a lot of pushback from people in the
show, I recall.
Right, and we get a lot of pushback
it's not original with me.
by saying that we're pulling people apart. And that we have no business doing that.
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily pulling people apart. I think it's really just kind of recognizing the reality. And sometimes it's like tearing off a Band-Aid. It hurts at first, but you can't necessarily address problems until they're recognized in the first place. And it might be uncomfortable to bring those issues up at first, but at some point it needs to come up.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going with this, is that I think people do understand that there's a need for society and for policymakers, our elected officials, to recognize the needs of all members of our society and address them when they're making decisions about what's best for us.
Okay, we are just getting warmed up, and we'll have much more on the cost of housing right after we check the first alert weather. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about the cost of housing and living after passage of the GOP tax plan, and joining us for more is John Thaxton of the Gulf Coast Community Foundation, Dan Lobeck, who has battled overdevelopment in Sarasota County for years, and Michael Snipes, an economics instructor at USF Sarasota Manatee. I want to use another quote from that research report, Something's Got to Give, by the Center for Housing. Compared with working families in more affordable housing areas, families that pay more than half of the household expenditures for housing reduce expenditures for other essentials like food, clothing, and health care. I mean, that's That's really, that's stuff that really is worrisome. Let's talk about the solutions out there. John, what are you seeing in our own community that gives you belief that we can find answers to this?
Well, let's first talk about what I believe to be the greatest impact. And the greatest impact to those households are to the children. The children are not getting the proper nutrition, they're not getting the proper time with their parents, with education, and there's too much travel time. And it's one thing to speak of the impacts to the adults, but for my foundation, the impacts to the children are what we're really focusing on. We want to make sure that the next generation is not impacted by these economic consequences that their parents are suffering through. So it's very serious. We know that wages will be impacted. We know that graduation. We know that college attenuation. These are all metrics that we look at as we assess the consequences of the decisions that we're making based upon, quote, the family or the parents.
Yeah, Dan, we are trying to strike a balance here on the Suncoast between overdevelopment, an issue that you have worked so hard on, and the affordability of housing, not just for the wealthiest among us, but as I said from the outset, the police and firefighters and teachers, some of whom commute over an hour to work.
Yes, and the problem, it seems to me, with regard to housing affordability, has been that our county and city commissioners have just given away everything the developers have wanted. Density wherever they want it, allow them to pave over wetlands wherever they want it, intrude into neighborhoods wherever they want it, without getting anything for the public in return. And my view has always been, for the decades I've been involved, is there should be requirements for affordable housing in the right locations if a developer is going to get a density increase. And we're about to hit the biggest boom Sarasota County has ever seen in development with what's been approved that is now starting to be built. And not only our roads are going to get overcrowded, but with the price points that are being built, housing prices are going to go up.
Have you seen any evidence that our wonderful county commissioners are putting the brakes on or more requirements on these developers to do what you're suggesting?
To the contrary. They waived the affordable housing requirement for Benderson's Mall. They reduced the affordable housing overlay requirements east of the interstate from 50% affordable housing to 15%. So when the developers pick and choose, handpick the candidates and bankroll them to success, they're going to get what they want, not what's good for the common person.
Michael, the supporters of the tax bill that was just passed into law continue to say that a lot of the problems that we are talking about tonight are going to be solved because wages will increase. And they point to evidence that a lot of major corporations are announcing that they intend to increase wages and they're giving out nice bonuses to their employees. You know, I mean, are you looking at that and saying, okay, this is a good start, this is exactly what the Republicans said that they wanted to deliver on?
I think you can take two different approaches to that. On one hand, you do have some companies, some big companies saying that they are going to increase wages, and that's good. If they actually do implement that and put that into a policy, that's great. But on the other hand, you also see a lot of other companies saying that, well, they're on record saying we're not going to take these tax breaks and use it to increase wages or investment. We're going to use it to do stock buyback, really to try and increase the price of a stock and kind of consolidate wealth for the stockholders. And if we use the tax breaks in that way, it doesn't get reinvested back into the economy, it's not really going to do anything for wages. So if we've got a certain set of companies that say they are going to increase wages, that's great, right? They still have to actually do it, though.
You made an interesting point when we were in the break talking about Walmart and that the corporation, which does say that they are going to be increasing the minimum wage for their employees to $15 an hour, but...
Sure. Yeah, and again, it's kind of under the umbrella of what we call, trickle-down economics, which is a pretty straightforward idea. If you cut taxes, people have more money to spend. That stimulates the economy. But really, the key thing there is that money that we get from tax breaks, that has to be reinvested back into the economy for any kind of stimulation to take place. And so we can have Walmart saying we're going to increase wages for our employees and things like that. But if we look at the bigger corporation, Walmart also owns Sam's Club. And so we can also say, well, if we're increasing wages for Walmart employees, they'll put out a press release the next day saying we're closing several Sam's Clubs, laying off several thousand people.
Well, you know, here's another point to that. When we talk about police and firefighter and teachers, we're not talking about employment which are getting tax breaks back to then turn around and contribute to higher wages. So for a lot of our public employees, we're not talking about any kind of huge benefit, except for on the individual basis that you're going to be paying less taxes in terms of your individual taxes.
Which is a good thing.
Yes.
You know, I don't think we should denigrate the fact that everybody's going to have more money in their pockets. Whether it should be more, whether it should be less, you know, is something that could be debated. How it's distributed among people of different incomes, but you know, hopefully it's helping the economy. Certainly, it's on a roll now, but it's a question of where the economy gets guided in questions like real estate development. That's going to determine whether everybody has a place to live.
Right, but and John, and you served at the county level, so you know for this firsthand. We're not going to see massive wage increases when we're talking about our police and firefighters and teachers and so forth.
We're not, and frankly, for me, I would prefer to shift the focus, just at least temporarily, on those service workforce personnel that provide the quality of life that every Sarasota resident enjoys every single day. And some of the earlier comments from the interviews suggested that it's nearly impossible to make ends meet for these professional individuals. Well, for the service workforce, it's not nearly impossible. It is impossible. And they characterize it as a nightmare. For the service workforce, it's a horror story. The numbers simply do not align. But yet these are the individuals that we rely upon day in and day out. So for me, it's not a matter of assigning blame or casting aspersions, but first to recognize as a community, as a body of elected officials, that we have a problem, and that each and every decision that we make with regards to land use, hospital care, and education, we need to incorporate into those decisions how is this going to impact or exacerbate this affordable housing dilemma that we're facing.
We only have a few seconds left here, but is that difficult to do if you're dealing with a great number of people in the community and the people who are in office who are doing just fine, thank you?
It is difficult to do, but I would call your attention to some of the recent announcements and the success that we've had in housing the homeless, individuals that are making 40% of area mean income. If we can make progress there, we can make progress here. We just need a community alliance to make it happen.
Okay, we have to take a quick break, and we'll be back for final thoughts in a moment. And our guests join us right now for final thoughts. So, Michael, what do you want our viewers to take away from this conversation and really the situation we're in, both with the tax cut plan and the affordability of living right here in our beloved Suncoast?
Well, I think kind of ultimately, first off, I think we're all in agreement here, is that there needs to be maybe some consensus building or maybe some re-examining of facts or statistics or just kind of an assessment of the current state. There needs to be an agreement about kind of what the state of housing is before we can kind of really move forward on what we should do about solving some of these problems that we have.
But, you know, Dan, we talked again in the break about how polarized that our community is, not just here, but across the country. But around here, we go to extremes, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of it talking by people on both sides about how to solve some of these problems.
Well, I've been trying to do that, and I know a lot of other people that have. And the problem is, I know I'm harping on this, but the developers have such complete gridlock control over policy that it's not being guided towards affordable housing. It's being guided towards things that are going to not help the quality of life in our community for the poor, for the middle class, or for the well-off.
So, John, what do you see coming in the next couple of years?
I don't really consider myself to be an optimist. I consider myself to be a realist. That's the person that looks at the glass and says it's at 50% capacity. And I believe that we have the resources and we have the motivation in this community to bridge these gaps. And I know that sounds optimistic, but I serve a great deal on the inside, and we have opportunities in Sarasota County. We have resources here that are distinctive, if not unique, to our community, and we just need to use those to make this happen.
All right, we'll have to leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you very much. But before we go, we want to share with you what some of you had to say about last night's show. We were joined by the former U.S. ambassador to South Korea, Christopher Hill. Hill spoke on his time as ambassador, as well as what's been going on between President Trump and North Korea. And here's what some of you had to say. Jeff says, Trump inherited this mess the Democrats created. But Susan says the six-party talks began in 2003 under George W. Bush's presidency. And Kevin says, what does the U.S. ambassador to South Korea think about this? Oh, wait, we don't have an ambassador to South Korea. Well, if you'd like to join the conversation about tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/mysuncoast.com.abc7. And FYI, you can watch past discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. And for the latest on local breaking news, don't forget to download the updated version of our app. If your current app doesn't work, that's because it's expired. Just go to the App Store and re-download it by searching for WWSB or My Suncoast. We want to thank all our guests for being here tonight. John Thaxton is with the Gulf Coast Community Foundation. Dan Lobach has battled overdevelopment in Sarasota County for years. And Michael Snipes is an economics instructor at USF Sarasota Manatee.